The Senate Banking Committee hearing room fell dead silent as Tim Scott leaned into his microphone, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Representative Crockett, you talk about helping communities, but what have you actually done besides make noise on social media? The attack was swift, calculated, and designed to embarrass the Texas Democrat in front of millions watching C-SPAN. But what happened next would shock everyone in that room. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't look down. Instead, she smiled the kind of smile that makes opponents nervous. Because what Tim Scott didn't know was that Crockett had been waiting for this exact moment. She had receipts, she had facts, and she was about to deliver a response that would leave the South Carolina senator completely speechless and trending on every social media platform within minutes. This wasn't just another political disagreement. This was about to become an epic takedown that would define both of their careers and show America exactly what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss these amazing political moments. Seriously, you won't want to miss what happens next because this is about to get absolutely wild. Now let's see how Jasmine Crockett turned the tables on Tim Scott in the most spectacular way possible. The stage was set for what would become one of the most talked about exchanges in recent political history. Senator Tim Scott, sitting confidently behind his nameplate, thought he had found an easy target in the first-term representative from Texas. But he was about to learn that underestimating Jasmine Crockett was the biggest mistake of his political career. The irony was thick in the air. Here was Scott, a man who had spent years positioning himself as the reasonable voice of conservative black politics, about to get schooled by a woman who had actually spent her life fighting in the trenches for justice. The contrast couldn't have been more perfect, the establishment politician versus the street-smart attorney, the careful moderate versus the unapologetic progressive, the senator who played it safe versus the representative who came to fight. The hearing had been routine until that moment, discussions about banking regulations, committee business, the usual Washington back and forth. But tension had been building between Scott and Crockett for weeks over their different approaches to economic policy affecting black communities. Scott, as the highest-ranking black Republican in the Senate, often clashed with progressive Democrats like Crockett over solutions to systemic issues. The backstory made this confrontation even more explosive. Just 2 weeks earlier, Crockett had called out Scott's voting record during a CNN interview, noting that he had voted against every major piece of legislation that would have directly helped black families. Scott's team had been furious, issuing press releases and demanding retractions. But Crockett had doubled down, providing receipts for every claim she made. The tension had been simmering ever since, with both sides waiting for the right moment to settle the score. What made this confrontation so explosive was that it came completely out of nowhere. Crockett had been quietly taking notes, listening to testimony, when Scott decided to make her his target. The cameras were rolling, C-SPAN was broadcasting live, and social media was about to explode. To understand why this moment was so significant, you need to know exactly who these two political figures are and what they represent in American politics today. Tim Scott had been riding high in Republican circles. As the only black Republican senator, he carried enormous weight in the party. Born in North Charleston, South Carolina, Scott had built his career on a message of conservative values and personal responsibility. He'd served in the House before moving to the Senate in 2013, and had even made a brief run for president in 2024 before dropping out. Scott's political brand was built on being the reasonable, conservative voice, someone who could speak to issues affecting black Americans while maintaining strict Republican principles. He was polished, experienced, and used to being the only black face in Republican leadership meetings. His supporters saw him as proof that the Republican Party was inclusive and forward-thinking. But critics argued that Scott often served as political cover for policies that hurt the very communities he claimed to represent. They said he was more interested in appealing to white conservative voters than actually fighting for black Americans. This tension had been building for months, as Scott positioned himself as a countervoice to progressive Democrats. The truth was, Scott had become comfortable in his role as the GOP's go-to black voice. He'd grown used to deference from colleagues, respect from conservative media, and the assumption that his perspective would go unchallenged. He'd participated in countless debates where his identity gave him automatic credibility on racial issues, regardless of his actual positions. This comfort had made him overconfident, perhaps even arrogant, about his ability to handle any challenger who might question his approach. On the other side sat Jasmine Crockett, and she represented everything that made establishment politicians nervous. A former criminal defense attorney from Dallas, Crockett had been elected to Congress in 2022 as part of a new wave of young, progressive Democrats who weren't interested in playing by the old rules. At just 42 years old, Crockett had already made a name for herself as someone who didn't back down from fights. She'd gone viral multiple times for her sharp questioning during committee hearings and her ability to break down complex issues in ways that regular people could understand. Her background as a defense attorney had taught her how to think quickly under pressure and how to dismantle weak arguments piece by piece. Crockett represented a district that was majority black and Hispanic, and she'd won her seat by promising to be an unapologetic advocate for working families. She wasn't interested in compromise for the sake of compromise, and she especially wasn't interested in being lectured by Republicans about what was best for her community. What made her particularly dangerous to opponents was her combination of legal training, social media savvy, and genuine connection to the people she represented. Unlike many politicians who seemed disconnected from real struggles, Crockett had grown up in South Dallas and understood poverty.